Dana Cole wrote guilty across the verdict form in slow, deliberate letters. Around the long table, 11 jurors watched her uncap a black pen. Empty coffee cups stood between stacks of exhibits. Rain pressed against the narrow courthouse windows, turning the afternoon into something that already felt like evening. Dana looked around the room. One last time. "Does anyone need to review anything?" No one answered. At the far end of the table, Eli Mercer stared at a security camera photograph. It showed a hooded figure crossing the warehouse loading area beneath a glowing timestamp, 9:18 p.m. The prosecution had displayed that image again and again. It placed Andre Bell near the building minutes before the fire. It was the piece everyone remembered. But beneath the photograph, in smaller print, Eli saw a notation he had barely noticed during the trial. System clock, 11 minutes fast. Dana lowered her pen toward the signature line. Eli's chair scraped against the floor. "I think we put the events in the wrong order." Every face turned toward him. Earlier that afternoon, the case had seemed almost too simple. Andre Bell had worked at the North River warehouse for 3 years. On the night of the fire, his supervisor dismissed him after an argument on the loading floor. 2 employees heard Andre say the supervisor would regret it. Less than an hour later, flames spread through the rear storage area. A night custodian suffered severe burns before firefighters pulled him outside. The prosecution laid out the sequence cleanly. Andre lost his job. He made a threat. He bought gasoline. He returned to the warehouse. Then the building burned. A witness reported seeing someone in a gray sweatshirt near the loading entrance. Andre owned a gray sweatshirt. A red fuel container sat in the trunk of his car. His phone had been switched off during part of the evening. By the time the jury entered the deliberation room, the story seemed finished. Dana, a small business owner with a steady voice, took control before anyone else had chosen a seat. She wrote the major facts on the whiteboard and connected them with a straight line. Argument. Threat. Gasoline. Warehouse. Fire. Several jurors nodded before she had finished. Eli worked as a data quality analyst. His days were spent finding numbers that had been copied into the wrong columns, dates that had shifted during imports, and conclusions that no longer matched their source records. He had noticed weaknesses in the case. The witness had never seen the figure's face. The fuel container had been dry when police recovered it. The fire investigator could only estimate when the fire began. But each time Eli considered raising one of those points, someone else spoke with greater confidence. One juror called the case obvious. Another said innocent people did not switch off their phones. Dana reminded them that 12 separate details all pointed in the same direction. Eli waited for someone else to express doubt. No one did. When Dana passed out the first paper ballots, Eli looked at the word guilty written in 11 different handwritings. Then he wrote it too. Now Dana stood beside the nearly completed verdict form, watching him hold the security photograph. The clock was 11 minutes fast, Eli said. The image wasn't taken at 9:18. It was taken at 9:07. Dana frowned. He was still at the warehouse. Maybe. But not when we said he was. A juror near the door leaned back. You voted guilty. I know. So what is this? Eli looked around the table. No one appeared curious. They looked tired, hungry, and betrayed by the person who had waited until the end to become difficult. He asked for the transit records. Dana remained standing while Marisol Vega, an emergency room nurse seated near the evidence cart, searched through the defense exhibits. She found a printed record showing Andre's transit card had been used on a city bus at 9:14. The route stopped several blocks from the warehouse. Dana glanced from the record to the photograph. He had 7 minutes, she said. To do what? To leave the warehouse and reach the bus. That isn't the order we agreed on, Eli replied. We said he was at the warehouse at 9:18. A different juror rubbed both hands over his face. So the time was wrong. That doesn't erase the threat, the gas can, or the fire. Eli could feel the room closing around him. His observation had not impressed anyone. It had only taken away their sense of completion. Dana pulled the sign page from the verdict form and placed a blank one on top. "You stopped the verdict," she said. "Show us why." Eli walked to the whiteboard. He rewrote the timeline carefully. At 8:41, Andre argued with his supervisor and was dismissed. At 8:56, a gas station receipt showed that he purchased fuel. His sister had testified that her car had stalled several miles away. At 9:07, according to the corrected camera clock, a grey figure crossed the loading area. At 9:14, Andre's transit card was used on the bus. The fire investigator estimated that ignition occurred sometime between 9:12 and 9:28. The first emergency call came at 9:31. Dana studied the board. He could have started it before he left. The investigator said the fire probably began after 9:12. Then he used a delay. Several jurors nodded at once. Eli turned toward them. "What delay?" The room became still. "A timer," someone said. "Which exhibit showed a timer?" No one answered. Marisol opened the trial transcript. The fire investigator had said a delayed ignition was possible. He had not found a timer, an electrical trigger, or any other delay device. The jury had remembered a possibility as evidence. Marisol walked closer to the whiteboard. She pointed at the photograph and then at the fire estimate. "The prosecutor always showed these together," she said. Eli remembered it too. The image labeled 9:18 had appeared beside a graphic placing the start of the fire minutes later. The arrangement had made the sequence feel certain even though the corrected time placed the image earlier. The timeline had not merely contained an error. The error had helped create the story. The jurors stopped looking at the exhibits and began looking at Eli. One accused him of confusing doubt with innocence. Another said people who stayed quiet through an entire discussion did not get to overturn it at the last moment. Then Dana asked the question Eli had hoped no one would ask. "If you noticed all this, why did you vote guilty?" He stared at the ballot still lying near his empty coffee cup. Years earlier, at work, he had found an error in a monthly report. He had waited until he could prove exactly how it happened. Before he finished checking, a colleague was blamed for entering the wrong numbers. Eli had told himself he was being careful. The colleague had still paid for his silence. "I wasn't sure," he said. Dana's expression hardened. "None of us can be completely sure." "That isn't what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Eli had no answer that made him look principled. The room had been confident, and he had wanted its confidence to be deserved. Voting with them had been easier than discovering whether it was. Dana placed the clean verdict form in the center of the table. "We can vote again." Eli sat down. The courthouse clock moved past 6. Dinner trays waited untouched against the wall. Several jurors avoided looking at him. If he maintained his objection, the jury might remain divided. The case could end without a verdict. The injured custodian's family would leave without an answer. And Andre might still be guilty. Eli reached for his pencil. Marisol slid the transit record across the table. "What was the question you wanted us to answer?" Eli looked at the evidence surrounding him. He had been trying to replace the prosecution story with a different one. But he could not prove where Andre went after boarding the bus. He could not identify the figure in the photograph. He could not explain how the fire began. He stood again and erased the timeline. Across the board, he drew 3 columns. Proven. Suggested. Assumed. The argument belonged under proven. So did the purchase of gasoline, the bus record, and the fact that Andre's phone had been turned off. The witness seeing a grey sweatshirt belonged under suggested. Andre carrying the fuel into the warehouse belonged under assumed. The red container holding the accelerant belonged under assumed. Laboratory testing had found no residue connecting it to the fire. The figure in the photograph being Andre belonged under assumed. The witness had observed the person through rain from across the parking lot. The use of a delayed ignition belonged under assumed. One by one, the statements that had made the case feel complete moved into the third column. Eli put down the marker. "I voted guilty because all of you sounded certain," he said. "And I didn't want to be the person who made the room harder." No one interrupted him. "I'm not saying Andre is innocent. I'm saying I helped turn what might have happened into what we said happened." He pointed to the corrected timeline. "What fact places Andre inside the warehouse after 9:14? Dana opened the evidence binder. Another juror searched the transcript. Marisol read through the investigator's report. Minutes passed. No one found the fact. Dana finally closed the binder. "That doesn't mean he wasn't there." "No," Eli said. "It means we don't know that he was." The next vote was 8 guilty and 4 not guilty. They reviewed the eyewitness account. Then the fuel analysis. They listened again to the technician explaining the camera clock. The next vote was 5 guilty and 7 not guilty. Each time someone used the words obviously or must have, Eli asked which exhibit supported the statement. Sometimes there was one. Often there was not. Dana remained the strongest guilty vote. She stood before the whiteboard, studying the distance between the columns. "You're willing to release someone who may have done this?" Earlier, Eli would have softened his answer until it offended no one. Now he met her eyes. "I'm not willing to convict him because he may have." Dana requested the technician's testimony one final time. The corrected timestamp remained unchanged. The photograph placed an unidentified person near the warehouse before the earliest reliable ignition estimate. No evidence established that Andre entered afterward. No evidence connected the fuel in his sister's car to the substance used in the fire. The prosecution's version remained possible. It no longer looked proven. Dana changed her vote last. When the clerk read the verdict, Andre Bell closed his eyes and gripped his mother's hand. Across the aisle, the injured custodian's family sat without moving. Eli felt no triumph. The verdict had not revealed who started the fire. It had only acknowledged what the evidence could not establish. Outside the courthouse, the jurors separated beneath a gray evening sky. Dana paused on the steps and gave Eli a restrained nod. Then she walked away. The following morning, Eli returned to work. During the weekly meeting, his manager displayed a chart and announced that one employee's mistake had caused the department to miss its target. Eli studied the totals. They did not support the conclusion on the screen. The manager reached for the next slide. Eli placed his hand on the table. "Can we go back one line?" The screen remained on the unfinished conclusion.